First up is how to summon an Ooze Monstrosity. This shape-shifting ooze is actually named Zlorb and can be summoned using a class action called an apple a day. This ooze can shapeshift into a minotaur, direwolf, phase spider, or even shadow mastiff. And in its ooze form, it's a large, colorful blob that can shoot acid or lash out with a slimy gray tentacle. It also creates an acid surface whenever it takes damage. And this ooze is actually none other than the strange ox you encounter in Act 1, and depending on your choices, he can actually follow you for the entire game. To get Zlorb the Ooze to fight for you, you'll need to save the Tieflings in Act 1, choose to save Dame Aylin so that Last Light Inn isn't destroyed in Act 2, and then finally in Act 3, you need to find the strange ox in a barn and offer to smuggle him into the city. If you agree, he'll shapeshift into a strange apple, thus the name An Apple a Day, that you can pick up, and once you enter the lower city, he thanks you and offers to join you in the final fight where you can summon and control him. Next up is how to perform your way out of jail. If you ever get sent to jail on a character with perform, you can actually use that skill to escape. To do this, first make some distance between you and the door and start performing. Once a guard hears you, he'll actually open the jail door so he can listen a little more closely to your performance. Once he's inside the cell, you can cast invisibility on yourself, and as he's leaving the cell, you can just follow him out. The classic escape from jail like a bard. And if you like that tip, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe for more Baldur's Gate 3 videos. Next up is how to get infinite spell slots and sorcery points. In Act 2, there's a trader called Lantarv who sells 2 potions of angelic relief, which grant you the effects of a short rest and restore all of your level 1 and level 2 spell slots. This, when used by a sorcerer combined with refreshing the trader's stock through leveling up a hireling, means that you can essentially get infinite spell slots and sorcery points. Sorcerers have 2 abilities, one called Create Sorcery Points, which spends spell slots in order to gain sorcery points, and Create Spell Slot, which does the opposite. All you need to do is convert your level 1 and 2 spell slots into sorcery points, and then use a potion of angelic relief to restore them. Then you can use those sorcery points to create higher level spell slots, or just use them in any way you want after you stocked up on a bunch of them. You can even stock up on these potions of angelic relief that Lantarv sells, since he's not going to be around forever, and take this trick with you into Act 3. And next up is Marvin the Talking Skull. Inside a Worm's Rock prison cell, there is an unusual skull that you can actually interact with, and at first glance, what might look like just another bone on the ground is actually a talking skull. This skull apparently belonged to a powerful wielder of magic who was able to retain their ability to speak through this skull. By speaking to the skull and answering its riddles, it promises you that it will teleport you out of the prison cell to freedom. This sequence of events really reminds me of the scene in The Hobbit where Gollum and Bilbo trade riddles, and if Bilbo wins, then Gollum must show him the way out. Kind of the same thing with this skull promising you freedom if you answer his riddles correctly. And next up is the Flail of the Ages. This weapon comes with a level 3 transmutation spell called Elemental Age. This is a spell which enchants a weapon to grant it +1 to attack rolls and plus 1d4 elemental damage of your choice of either cold, fire, or acid until long rest. Each of these also inflict conditions on your target. Acid reduces armor class by 2, chilled makes the entity vulnerable to cold and resistant to fire damage, and fire inflicts burning, dealing 1d4 fire damage per turn. But what makes this different from, say, the Drake Throat Glaive is that you cannot actually target with this spell. It will always be used on your main hand weapon. Now, usually that would mean that's just the flail itself, but with dual wield, you can actually cast this on a different weapon when holding the Flail of Ages in your offhand. So you can actually grab another party member's weapon, cast Elemental Age on it, and then pass it back to give them this buff. Now, of course, as long as you have a dual wielder in your party, you'll have access to this awesome buff on a different weapon rather than the Flail of Ages. Otherwise, it will just enchant itself. And next up is the amazing combination of Sphere of Invulnerability and Transfuse Health. If you stand within a globe of invulnerability with the Illithid power Transfuse Health, you're able to use this ability as an incredibly powerful heal without any drawbacks. Transfuse Health sacrifices 50% of your remaining hit points and heals your target for that amount. But while inside the effects of a sphere of invulnerability, you won't lose any health, but your target still gets the full heal. Also, there's no cooldown on transfuse health, so you can use it every single turn if you wanted to. And since the sphere lasts for 3 turns, that's up to 150% of your health in healing during that duration. So yet another amazing use case for Sphere of Invulnerability, which is available for sorcerers and wizards at level 11. And next up are rare special containers. Now we've all found pouches and backpacks, but there are a number of hidden containers that add a lot of flavor to your inventory organization. One really cool one is the Curious Book. This book can be filled with items just like any container, but being a book, it kind of makes a lot of sense to hold all the spells that you find throughout your adventures. And what's great about this is that spells can actually be cast while inside a container. So just place it on your bar and you've got access to all your spell scrolls easily. If you're like me, you probably ended up never using your scroll spells because you just saved them for a harder encounter that's definitely right around the corner, but that just never happened and you never used your scrolls. But now, with a handy book on your hotbar, you can remember to use them. You can find the Curious Book just as you leave the Blighted Village heading north to the left along the wall on the opposite side of the windmill. There's also a teddy bear you can use as a container if a book isn't your style, found in the Hag Swamp, or a bucket of fish that you can find along the coast right as you wake up from the Nautiloid crash. There's also even a rib cage, also found in the Hag Swamp if you're going for more of a necromancer type run and want to store your spells in there. But one of my personal favorite containers is Wulbren. Not too heavy and can hold a lot of stuff. I'd say Wulbren is really the ideal backpack. And next up is the Morning Lord's Radiance. This buff grants all party members an additional 1d4 radiant damage to all weapon attacks. This buff might not seem like much, but when combined with Luminous Gloves, which grant you the ability to give your targets radiating orb when hit by radiant damage, you can very quickly make your enemies unable to hit you. To get this buff, you'll need to place all 4 ceremonial weapons in their proper places in the Rosymorn Monastery, each of which can be found not far from where they need to be placed. And although this buff disappears upon long rest and cannot be gotten again by placing the items once more, you could strategically pick this buff up right after a long rest in order to maximize how long you'll use it for. And next up is the Night Song's Favor. This buff grants resistance to necrotic damage until your next long rest. This is gained by praying at the Altar of Shar, hidden within the Gauntlet of Shar. In order to get this buff, you'll need to pass a DC 14 Religion Intelligence check, which is easiest for Shadowheart because being Shadowheart gives her advantage on this roll, but actually any party member can get this buff, and it's really useful because there's a lot of necrotic damage in Act 2. However, you'll also want to be careful when doing this because if you fail this roll, you're actually going to be hexed by a curse called Shar Stricken, which is not great to have. And next up is Refreshed. This is a buff that grants plus 10 to maximum HP until long rest. This is gained by drinking from the well outside the gnarled tea house. Depending on if you dispel the illusion in the swamp, the well appears in 2 different ways. With the illusion, the well appears to have fresh, sweet-smelling water, but if you dispel the illusion, the well reeks of piles upon piles of dead flesh. Either way, drinking from the well gives you this buff, which can be very useful if you don't have access to aid in your party. However, this buff goes away if you enter into combat with Auntie Ethel, and it is instead replaced with the debuff Nauseous, becoming vulnerable to psychic and acid damage until long rest. A very bad buff to have when facing off against the Sister of the Seeing Pearl. And next up is Auntie Ethel's Charm. This charm grants all the possible bonus effects of Enhanced Ability, which is advantage on all ability checks, doubling of your carrying capacity, and you gain temporary hit points. Now this charm is actually pretty amazing. Considering advantage on all ability checks is actually incredible. Unfortunately, these buffs will only last until long rest, and even more unfortunate is that the price for this charm is actually pretty high. Now in order to get this charm, you need to have Auntie Ethel attempt to remove your tadpole, which involves agreeing to have her mess with your eye, which leaves you with the paid the price condition permanently, which is really not that great of a condition to have. And next up is how to modify Vampire Bite's damage. Now for some reason, if Astarion is hiding when he uses Vampire Bite, it actually deals no damage, but he still gets the happy buff and he even gets healed, but his target takes no damage. So this is great for when using Vampire vampire bite on a party member, of course other than Gale or Karlach, and afterwards you can get rid of the bloodless condition by using lesser restoration. This is especially handy in places like Act 2 where there's not much for Astarion to feed off of since he can't feed off of undead or constructs. And next up is how to get the Punch Drunk achievement. To do this you need to defeat 20 opponents while drunk. To do this very easily, first take a drunken shart in the basement of the Elfsong Tavern. To get drunk, all you need to do is drink an alcoholic beverage, then it's as easy as casting Spirit Guardians and all the rats down there will dash towards your shart and you'll get punch drunk in no time. And last we have Drow in Act 1. Playing as a drow or being disguised as a drow when encountering goblins in Act 1 is a huge advantage because goblins are struck with awe by the sight of drow. You can easily just waltz through the blighted village without a fight by simply being drow. The forward scouting post of the goblin camp literally just has the goblin yelling to move out of the way, a drow is coming through, and then when you get to the gate of the goblin camp you can select the drow dialogue options to get through without a difficulty check at all. So even if you don't want to play a drow, disguising as one helps out a lot. But if you don't fancy being a drow, you can actually cut the string holding a boulder at the goblin camp scout post to have it roll down and actually instantly kill some goblins, which is pretty cool.